Welcome, everybody, to the Dwelt podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Waite, here with Chris Hardman and Dan Jensen. And just like usual, there's a lot going on in the world, a lot of things that we have to address. We've got Russia threatening Poland, military strikes on Poland, freezing U.S. assets. We've got graduations being canceled. We've got, let's see, what else is going on in the world today? Let me pull up my list. There's so much I can't even keep track of it. There's a Ukrainian troll that came out as being employed by the government. We have Bernie Sanders accusation going on. There's we're going to talk some scriptures and some numbers in scriptures that kind of tie to our time. We're going to talk about small town revivals, and man, there's a lot going on. Chris, what's on your list?
I mean, all of that. We could talk. We could go into Tucker, talking about all the CIA stuff that they did.
Oh yeah, and creatures from other dimensions, right?
Yeah. We could get into the UFO thing.
Yeah, there was a UFO that was spotted and filmed above LaGuardia Airport from an airplane. We can pull that one up and take a look at that.
Yeah.
What about you, Dan? What's on your list?
Man, definitely all that. And then I was thinking about all the protests on the college campuses, talking about maybe some of the stuff going on with Trump right now and his trial, and all the craziness with Biden. I mean, there's lots that we could talk about with all that. So,
oh yeah, you brought up the Trump trial, but also the union workers in New York City and some of the union support that's kind of appeared there. And then I know I saw a clip of a union worker who was asked if he had any words for Biden, and he gave Biden a couple of magic words. So yeah, we can talk on that. Right now we're kicking it off.
I was just going to say, I for one don't feel bad about the colleges getting eaten by their own creations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's kick that one off. Let's talk about that one, because I actually went to a college graduation yesterday at Brigham Young University here in Utah, and had an experience. It was it was a very just eerie feeling being there on campus. There weren't any protesters, but I can definitely share some of the thoughts that I have from yesterday's events. Dan, anything from the protests? You're the one that I think brought it up originally. Anything from the protests that you want to call out?
Just the thing that I was seeing with a lot of the clips and videos that I was watching was just that it's chaos. I mean, these are, and a lot of the people that they're interviewing don't have any idea what they're even protesting. Like, they're just joining up like in these groups, and they're hanging out with their buds, and like, it's just messed up, and they're causing all these problems. And then I also saw tons of police arresting even professors that were out there on some of the campuses. One lady got thrown to the ground with her face in the concrete. It looked to me on the video that she was just standing there. Like, so it was really odd that the cop just grabbed her and started tackling her. And so
yeah, and she's yelling like out, I'm a professor.
Chaos.
I'm a professor.
Yeah.
I saw that one.
Yeah,
that's kind of crazy.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, it's all over
and then I even saw a list.
It's all over the Palestinian stuff. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I saw a list of that someone shared. I think it was maybe on the Matt Walsh thing, where it's showing Florida and Florida University and their list of requirements. And I actually thought it was pretty solid, because it was listing like the things that are okay to do and the things that aren't okay to do. And a bunch of the things that aren't okay is like, don't sleep, like don't set up your tent and like camp overnight and crap like that, right? Like, you can talk, you can stand there, but don't sit there and yell into a megaphone. So I just feel like it's good that they're trying to do some things like that. I don't think any of those people are going to listen to it or read the list, but
yeah.
Man,
did you see the one in Florida where protesters had put a chair over a sprinkler head so that it wouldn't sprinkle the lawn, so that they could set up their tents and have a dry lawn to protest on? And some student sees it and grabs it and chucks the chair. And he's like, we're not going to make it easy for you guys. So
yeah,
Dan, that's a pretty, okay. So you brought up the idea that they have established rules around protesting. Like if you do this, we're not going to bug you. If you do this other thing, we're going to kick you out or tear down your tent, stuff like that. Isn't the idea with protesting to cause problems? I mean, yes, it is to hear your voice, but most of the effective protests that I think I've seen in my life is when they actually cause discomfort.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess that makes sense. So maybe in one perspective, it's kind of silly to even have the rules, but I don't know, man. It definitely seems chaotic and unnecessary. Like, I don't really know how it's going to impact anything. So maybe you guys have thoughts on that.
Chris, we got audio. Can you mute that?
Sorry.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's all
Chris
right.
likes to blast our ears.
It is one of those things thing. Like, yeah. How much do you think it would cost us to get Jamie in here to just take care of that so you could focus on all the other stuff? Probably a lot more money than any of us will ever see in our life. Yeah. Okay. So with the protesting thing, I think you kind of want it to get out of hand if you're a protester.
Yeah.
Because if it gets out of hand, then the news covers it. You get a couple of guys arrested and, the news covers that. And then that gives them a platform to talk, their stuff. And it just creates all this noise. So I think, the police departments of these universities can say, do this, don't do that. But that gives the checklist to the protesters. Hey, if we do these things, they're actually going to engage with us.
Yeah.
Which is what they want. So I think it's so this is where they
I'm just pulling up random videos I'm finding
hold on, mute that one. There we go. We didn't hear any of what you said because it was playing the audio from the video.
Sorry, guys.
No, you're good.
I muted the tab, so I thought that would do it, but I guess
not. Yeah, that's all right.
I muted Twitter as a whole site, but I guess it didn't work. I was wondering why everyone got really quiet as soon as I hit play. I was like, did something happen? Because I'm not looking at the
we're listening. We're like, what are these guys saying? I think one is the one where they pulled down the American flag and put up the Palestinian flag and started chanting free Palestine. Crazy.
Yep.
So as I was on college campus yesterday, we park and we have to walk to the building where they're having a reception. And then we walk to another building where they have the actual ceremonies. And we're walking to the first building and it's a beautiful spring day. The trees are blossoming. It's warm. I can feel the sun on my bald head. And I see these students, they're like dressed in their summer clothes, just like riding around on their scooters or hanging out on the lawn. And I'm like, oh, this is the perfect time for a protest to break out because finals are over for a bunch of them. Like they're ready to leave campus, move out. And this didn't happen on Brigham Young University, but I was thinking, okay, you're at Columbia, you're in New York. All of your homework is done. All of your finals are done. The season's winding down. It's like, sweet, let's go outside and let's be part of something. And it just brought me back to my college days of like, oh yeah, let's go out on the quad and play Frisbee, or, let's go out and have a picnic on a blanket. And it just makes me think that, I don't know, 98% of these kids are just there to connect as kids, to like meet girls and meet guys and, establish some credibility and stuff like that. And it's kind of this generation's thing that they can lay claim to. It's like protesting the Vietnam War all over again. They're like, oh yeah, I can be part of this. And I got arrested when I was in college for protesting. It's like a badge of honor for any blue blood that's out there, any left-leaning progressive person's like, I was fighting the man and I got arrested for it. So I think that's from a psychological standpoint, what's going on here, and a social standpoint, what's going on here. And that's why when they interview him, they're like, yeah, I don't know, something about Palestine, like free Palestine. I don't know.
You don't think
like,
they actually
I'm just
care
here to
about
meet
Palestine?
girls.
The 20-year-old going to NYU doesn't care.
They care about virtual signaling for it, at least. I mean,
that's fair.
I don't know. I guess calling them out for that.
We won't be able to upload this to YouTube because I'm going to say this, but apparently George Soros is funding all of these protests.
Yeah. That's what he's always doing. And the question I ask is why? If you're in his position, why would you do it? I mean, he's Israeli by descent, right? He's born Jewish. Why would he fund
born Jewish,
protests?
but helped the Nazis find Jews in World War II? So, not the most loyal guy in the world.
I was hoping you'd bring that up. Like, I mean, that's the context, right? How do you get all your wealth? Well, you side with the side that's got the money and is the winning side, so to speak. So,
yep. Yeah, it's interesting. This whole thing is kind of interesting to see the world sort of turn against Israel in a way that hasn't happened in my lifetime. So different than what we used to.
I mean, this keeps this verse keeps ringing in my ears or in my mind. Isaiah 10 verse 6, talking about the Assyrian. It says, I will send him against an hypocritical nation, and against the people of my wrath will I give him a charge, to take the spoil and to take the prey and to tread them down like the mire of the streets. As things get crazy, I keep thinking about that term, hypocritical nation. I'll send him against a hypocritical nation. And so I keep looking for ways in my life that I'm being hypocritical, or as a nation that we're being hypocritical. And there are a number of things I think that really stand out. One is, and some of my friends and a lot of our conservative listeners will probably get mad at me for saying this, but one of those things is immigration. So we are a nation that was founded on immigration. I mean, all the countries came here and immigrated here, and everybody here. I mean, we have very few native people left compared to, the percentage of people that are descendants of immigrants that came here. And so if we say,
okay, listeners who are going to get mad, it's your conservative co-host.
You're going to get
mad. So and that's where the hypocrisy comes in, not with my co-host or conservative listeners. It's like, if we claim to be this melting pot, which we've claimed forever, and, the land of the free and home of the brave, and send us your poor. And then we say, well, not those kind of poor. Well, not those kind of immigrants. We don't want those. It's like, that is by definition hypocrisy. Right. And so I don't think the Lord is saying, because you are having an immigration problem, you're a hypocritical nation. I think it is claiming to be something and then acting the opposite of that thing. That's where I was going with this. So not that illegal immigration is good or that we should support it, but that because that's happening and because of who we claim to be, we deserve the title of hypocritical nation.
I've always personally had a problem with the melting pot idea. That's where I get hung up, because to me, it's like, yeah, everybody used that term, like we're a melting pot and we're a country of immigrants and stuff. But it's like, yeah, immigrants all from the Nordic countries, like, or like Northern Europe, or Germany. Like, it was pretty, obviously the cultures are different, but they're not that different. Like, it's still pretty similar. Like, you can go to Germany and then go to the UK and you're not like in culture shock or anything. It's like more or less the same. So to me, I'm like, yeah, there is the melting pot, but it's like a melting pot of similar cultures. It's not like drastically different cultures, which is kind of what's starting to happen. I you and I have talked about it, and I've kind of like opened my mind a little to maybe they're coming here to be converted to the gospel, and that's great. But yeah, I've always had a hard time with the melting pot thing because I'm like, we're not truly a melting pot. It's like very, very similar cultures that were coming here initially.
Yeah, and the melting pot gives us a false idea that everybody came here and immediately became one under the banner of the United States. And if you live in any city, you know that's not necessarily the case. It's like, oh, here's where the Hispanic community is, and here's where the Korean community is, and here's where the Ghanan community is. And, you know, it's while we're all in the same place, we still tend to gravitate to people with similar cultures and similar ideals. Yeah, I mean, this moves us into kind of a different perspective on things in that, you know, we we have always had immigration to this land and to all other lands. Like, people come and go. And I was reading the other day that the first people to occupy the Levant, which is, you know, Israel, Palestine area, they started calling it the Levant so that they wouldn't have to just call it Israel. But occupying that area, some of the earliest people that came there were fair skinned, blonde haired, blue eyes. And that's totally different from the people that occupy that area now, whether they be of Jewish descent or whether they be of Arabic descent or, you know, whatever it is. It doesn't really represent the people who were originally there. And that's probably one of the most disputed land masses that there ever has been on this planet. So yeah, the flow of peoples reminds me of some conversations that we've had for years. And there's a guy on Twitter, a Christian, I can't remember his last name, Ascana or something like that, that is pushing pretty heavily that the Nordic people are descendants of the original occupants or some of the occupants of North America, which I really like. And we probably won't get into details here, but there's a theory that not the original, but many of the peoples that inhabited North America actually went to Scandinavia as the Vikings and established, you know, Viking civilizations, cultures, and then that Viking blood migrated down through Northern Europe and into England. And then you look at who founded the U.S. or who settled the U.S. or conquested the U.S. And it's that same blood. So it's a full circle. I think there's a pretty compelling case for that. They've got things like the way they built buildings, the way they built ships, the way that they had weaponry designed is the same in ancient Northern America and the Vikings. And so I think there's a lot there. You can get into 2 Nephi chapter 3 in the Book of Mormon, where Lehi is talking to his son Joseph and talks about future descendants of his descendants and of Joseph's descendants from Joseph from Egypt. And anyway, there's a lot there. Maybe we'll have Christian on the podcast and he can take us down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, we should. It's really interesting.
Pretty interesting stuff.
And the whole idea that they then went into the Germany region and they were the original Germanic tribes. And there's a lot of words like Viking words, Nordic stuff that match up with Hebrew. It's the Hebrew language. And so it's kind of an interesting connection between, I guess, ancient like Bible stuff and the Book of Mormon and then Vikings. It's all connected.
Yeah. So cool. Yeah. I'd love to think that number one, I'm descended from Vikings because I am. My ancestors come from England, which was, you know, all that Viking blood trickled down from Scandinavia into England and then over here. And I've got it running through my brain, or running through my body, so my veins. So that's pretty cool. Going back to immigration and open borders right now, whether it is, I've got one of my friends talks about it being the right hand of God or the left hand of God. So the right hand of God would be, it's a benevolent thing that helps us. The left hand of God is, it's a punishment to help us repent and return to God. Whether it's right hand or left hand of God, all of these immigrants pouring over, I think the correct response or the best response is to say who is my neighbor and how am I treating them? So how am I helping? How am I inspiring? What can I learn from them? And, that may sound like a very progressive approach to, again, conservative listeners, but I served a Latter-day Saint, an LDS mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Chile, in South America. And so I speak Spanish. I love the culture. I have good friends that are Hispanic, that are Chilean, good friends that are Mexican as well. And so I love the culture and the people. And I'm like, man, I would way rather see more of that in my life than more Taylor Swift, who also released a new album this last week that a lot of people are talking about, that mentions the date, the year 1830 in it. Have you guys seen that?
No.
Yeah.
So one of her songs says something to the effect of, if I could choose any year to live, it would be 1830, but without all the racism.
Oh yeah, I did see that.
Yeah. And
she's the worst.
She is the worst.
It's completely fake.
Is 1830 mentioned? Is that a coincidence? For those of you that don't know, 1830 is the year that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was formally organized and legally organized. So, Chris, do you think that's a coincidence?
I don't know. I think she's a witch, so she may have done it on purpose. Her and Beyonce, yeah, I just watched part of the same coven.
I have to follow it because my daughter loves it, and she was, super stoked about the new album. And what disappointed me is 7 out of the 16 songs on the album are explicit. So I was like, oh, great. Because my daughter's only 10. And I'm like, I don't know if I want her listening to all that. So I'm trying to listen to the album myself to kind of see what's going on and what it's talking about. And, saw the music video for that Fortnite song with Post Malone. And it's all just weird. It's just weird and kind of dark. And the whole album is really slow, like very slow compared to some of her other things that she's done. And so anyway,
Dan's like, yeah, it's just my daughter. I don't want to listen, but I have to listen for my daughter.
Yeah, exactly. She wants to play it all the time in the car. And so it's one of those things where it is kind of a real challenge. It's like, well, what do I do here? Like, I don't absolutely hate all of her music as far as like, yeah, it's catchy, whatever, we can listen to it on a road trip. But then at the same time, it's like, well, what kind of a message is she trying to convey? And with this audience of 10-year-old girls, like, how do I approach that as a dad? So,
yeah, I'm different from you guys. Well, I think I'm similar to you guys in a lot of ways. I used to love music. I used to write music. I used to perform music. I was the front man for a band in college, like play the guitar, all that kind of stuff. And so with my love for music, even my great great grandfather used to build pianos. Like we have music in our blood in our family. And I used to love music. So I got into music history and music theory. And then I, obviously pop music and rock music. And I was one of the kids that saw in real life the satanic scare of the 80s, where they were like, oh, all of the satanic stuff is happening. This is something crazy. You guys probably haven't ever heard of this. Maybe you have. I think Chris and I have talked about it, but there was a book in the 80s that was published called Jay's Journal. And it was a story about this kid who got into satanic stuff and ended up dying. Well, the person that book was, I guess, themed after or built after, lived across the street from me. So I grew up.
So there's a weird connection here because it was also my dad's best friend growing up, which I think is what we talked about.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So, Alton Barrett was his name, and he lived across the street from us. I never knew him. He was older than I was, and I think he'd passed away before I even knew what was going on. But his mom lived in the house across the street. So anyway, this was constantly in front of me as a kid. And, you know, it was in the news. And so I'm into music. And then, of course, I remember sitting in a neighbor kid's basement, and he puts on Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon, and he starts playing it backwards. He's like, check this out. My buddy showed me this, and there's backmasking on there. And it's like, now you've found the secret to Satan or something like that. And I remember listening to that. You guys familiar with what backmasking is? Dan, do you know what backmasking is?
No, but I'm kind of guessing.
Yeah.
They record.
I've always heard that this is a thing, but I've never like been able to prove it. So this is interesting.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. So I listened to that, and it creeped me the crap out. I was like, whoa, what is this? And then Led Zeppelin does some backmasking. Even Prince on one of his albums did backmasking, but the Prince backmasking is praising Jesus Christ and telling people to follow Christ. It's pretty rad. So, you know, I'm learning about this as a kid. I'm seeing things, and so I get into what happens in the music industry, and I start picking up, you know, this and that, and eventually YouTube comes out, and you can hear more of it and recordings, firsthand accounts of people who have been in the music industry. And now I'm like, dude, if it's a popular song that's playing on the radio, I won't even listen to it. I remember Owen Benjamin did this bit where he's like, it wasn't even a bit, it's some rant where he's like, all of this stuff is witchcraft, and if you sing it, the spell is complete. So when you're just bopping along with the music, he's like, that's when you become part of the spell. And so just from years of studying this stuff and being inquisitive about it, I'm like, I'm out. If it's pop music or popular music at all, I'm out. Which has been kind of wild, because I have good friends who, you know, I played music with, and, you know, we loved music, was a part of our life. And now that I don't have that, it's like those friendships are kind of, you know, fizzled out, because they're going to concerts, and I'm like, nah, I don't want to go participate in that. Oh, I did tell you guys that I actually went to the famous 9 Inch Nails concert in Salt Lake City, Utah, where Marilyn Manson was the opening act, and he got canceled. They wouldn't let him play. And so he came out and he ripped up a Book of Mormon and said, you know, some bad stuff about the Son of God and Savior of the world. And that was a big waking up for me. So yeah, I know you guys enjoy music. I just can't even handle it anymore. The second I hear it, I'm like, oh, this is blessed on an altar of darkness. I'm not going to partake.
Well, there's got to be something, though, that you listen to that is not like that, right? Like, is there anything that you put on while you're driving the long drives? And
yeah, so I'll listen to Mormon Tabernacle Choir, or the Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square. I'll listen to that stuff. My wife, for her primary calling, for those of you not familiar with primary is the classes that children go to in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. She put together playlists on YouTube. Dude, I'll listen to primary music, and it's awesome. I'll sit there and feel the emotion and like have the light enter. It's just incredible. So there are new tracks available through the church, where you go on Gospel Library, and every year they put out a new youth album. And I'll come home, and those things will be playing at my house sometimes, or I'll turn them on while I'm driving. And so, yeah, I think you have to be really discerning of music, and anything that comes out of Hollywood, I'm just like, not cool with it. And I know I'll probably lose a lot of people in this little rant, but gal, I've got some weird takes. I'm talking about immigration and music, and
there's like 10 directions I want to go right now, so bear with me.
Yeah, I'm feeling the same way. I've got like all these thoughts.
First, Mike Ma did a challenge once when he was still on social media, where he was like, just listen to only either nothing or classical music for like 30 days or 60 days or something. And so I was like, I'm going to do that. I think it was anything without lyrics. It just had to be instrumental.
Okay.
So I listened to classical music for 30 days, and it was like, initially for maybe the first week, one of the hardest. It was like breaking a drug addiction. It was so hard to like not go back.
Yeah, dude, because those evil spirits are like, this is uncomfortable. Take me out of this.
Yeah, it was really weird. I mean, yeah, it was striking because it was like, oh, I'm just switching the kind of music I'm listening to. This shouldn't be a hard thing, but it was actually pretty hard. And I love music too, so maybe that's part of it, but it was way, way harder than I thought it would be to just switch to classical music and not listen to any of the stuff that I usually listen to. So there's that. Then while you're talking, a lot of people are probably going to think that it's crazy, but
wait. What was the end result? So it's hard to break, but what was the end result?
So I did it. It's great. You feel good.
You became more powerful. That's what happened.
You really do though. Like you can think more clearly. There's not all this like noise in your head all the time. I don't know about other people, but like, even while we're sitting here talking, have a song going through my head. Like there's always music going through my head that gets stuck in my head or whatever. And so that goes away. You can actually think. There's just it's like a stillness, I guess. If you're trying to get in touch with the spirit, it's probably a good thing to do because you're going to be way more receptive to things when you don't have music blasting in your head all the time. I think that's one of the big things of the modern world is, and I'm really, really guilty of this, but we always have something playing. Like there's never a quiet moment. In the car, we're playing like music or a podcast, or don't turn this podcast off, but turn the other ones off. A podcast or music, or we got TV at home, or you're watching YouTube or videos on TikTok. There's just always some kind of noise happening. And so it was interesting to get a different, I guess, experience of silence and stillness that I don't usually have. So it was cool. You should, I would say try it out if you're listening. It's kind of a cool experiment to do. And see how you feel after.
If you're brave, the one guy that kind of reveals what's going on in Hollywood, his name is John Todd. I don't think he's around anymore, but he came out. He might have been part of the reason for the scare in the 80s, but he came out and was a whistleblower and was like, here are the spells that they use in music. And anyway, so if you're brave and strong, you might want to listen to that to get some context on all of this.
Well, and that brings up the other point I wanted to make is a lot of this probably sounds crazy to people who have never heard it, but it's like verifiable fact that the recording studio that like the Doors came out of, I think the Beach Boys recorded there. It's in LA, up the canyon. I never know what the canyon's called, but it's like the famous canyon there. It was started by the CIA. The whole studio was a CIA op. So the government, at the very least, the government has been involved in your music for a while and trying to use it as a tool to get what they want.
Okay, so can I comment on that? The government being involved in music. The Biden crime bill from I think it was 91, 92. We might need to Google that, but so this senator from Delaware, his name was Joe Biden, in the early 90s. I'd never heard of him, but he came out with some new legislation that allowed for prisons to be privatized. So prior to that bill, prisons were publicly owned by the government. But he introduced a bill that would allow private corporations to build and operate prisons and get paid per prisoner that they kept from the government. The idea was that if a private company could run a prison, they would do it more effectively and efficiently than the government could. And it would all be focused on turning people around. Like they get into this private prison, you turn them around and get them back out on the streets, and they can live a productive life. So that's the lie that it was pitched under. And the crime bill got passed, private prisons got built. And there are actually two accounts, one from somebody that I know personally, another one that actually came out online within the last year. Somebody within the industry started telling this story, and I was like, dude, that's the same story I heard in 2017. But the music industry actually had a meeting and said, we're going to go all in on rap music, and not just rap music, because rap music had been around for, since 78 or something like that. But in the early 90s, they said, we're going to go all in on gangster rap, and we're going to promote drug use and abuse and gang activity. And if you want in on this, this will be very lucrative for you, because we're also going to invest in prison companies. And a friend of mine, his dad was in on that meeting, and he was like, I'm out. I'm not going to do this. From that day forward, he was blacklisted in Hollywood, in the music industry, never was able to get paid to produce music. All the jobs that he had were canceled immediately, and he was out and had to move out of California. The other whistleblower talks about the same meeting and said those who were out, they locked out of the room and they were canceled from Hollywood. Those that were in all became very wealthy. And, this is probably stuff we shouldn't talk about on open airwaves, but yeah, the prisons got filled with young black men as victims. And it was all driven by this Joe Biden crime bill that caused millions, tens of millions of young black men to be imprisoned, in part driven by, allegedly, we'll just throw allegedly in there, driven by the music industry that was glorifying and building up gangster rap. So that's one example, I think, pretty well testified of and proven, of the government being involved and private industry being involved in your music.
So along with that, did you see some posts about Clive Davis? Like being involved in the death of Whitney Houston and some of these other artists. I don't know. I just saw some stuff yesterday about it. And so I wondered if you had any knowledge or thoughts about him, because he's pretty big.
Well, that gets us into, we've already talked about Jay-Z. We've talked about P. Diddy. We've talked about Beyonce. Many people are familiar with the 27 Club. These dozens, you can look up the Wikipedia page for the 27 Club, dozens of, hit musicians that came out and suddenly either OD or commit suicide at the age of 27. People like Janis Joplin, Kurt Cobain, Jimi Hendrix, all being wiped out at that age. And this kind of brings us full circle to what we were talking about Taylor Swift earlier. She's older than 27, but from what I've seen over my, 4 decades plus, almost 5 decades on this earth, is that, there you go. It's a cultural phenomenon. Jim Morrison, who was the son of a CIA operative. Look at that list of people that were all taken out. Anyway, tragic and horrible. Yeah, there you go. Look at that. So going back to Taylor Swift, I believe you either you make the agreement and you join the 27 Club, or you make the agreement and you're tied up for life. It's like, why is Mick Jagger still touring? Why is Bob Dylan still touring? Why is Madonna still touring? Like, you see these videos every, few months of Madonna like falling down on stage and breaking a hip, and she's all like Botoxed up and grotesque looking. And it's like, she has all this money. Why doesn't she just retire? And Bob Dylan was asked that in a 60-minute interview. And he's like, why do you still do it? And he's like, well, I'm still paying my debt to the big man. That's one you can look for on YouTube, is Bob Dylan interview about the Crossroads. And he talks about making a deal at the Crossroads, and he's spending the rest of his life paying that deal. And I think it's all humiliation ritual. Like, okay, you did the deal. I made you rich and famous, and you need to be involved in certain people's death, and you need to be humiliated for the rest of your life.
Yeah. This is interesting to me because this is another one of those things I haven't heard about before or thought of. And I know we talked a little bit about David Archuleta and kind of the shift that he's had this past couple of years. And so it's very intriguing to me.
Yeah.
This concept.
Yeah. And so, okay, what does this have to do with preparedness and dwelt, if we're bringing it full circle? Oh, there you go. Short clip of Bob Dylan admits he sold his soul to the devil for a short-lived fortune, fame, and glory. In that one, the guy's like, how did you write these songs? And Bob Dylan's like, it was magic. Like, I couldn't do that today, even if I tried. They were given to me. And yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Wow.
So what does this have to do with dwelt and preparedness? I think of the call of Babylon. Like, we have so much in our life that is just Babylonian in nature, from our sports entertainment to our music entertainment to our videos that we watch. It's like all about these carnal natures, this Babylonian stuff. And think of how uncomfortable it will be if you're used to swimming in Babylon to have Babylon fall and be left without it. How much you're going to crave those same sensations, but they won't be available to you. And so when we talk about the end of the world, I think that's where most people are like, man, it's going to be terrible. You know, I'm not going to be able to watch my Jazz basketball game, or I'm not going to be able to, you know, yell at University of Utah fans because BYU is the Lord's university. It's like all of those sensations are gone. How uncomfortable are you going to be? So
Yeah,
wouldn't it be great to be a dwelt? Oh, go ahead.
Like, to tie it back to with an example from the music industry, even people who are in Babylon and try and leave today seem to be unable to do it. Like someone like Kanye, who I think actually did try and just completely failed. But the pull of Babylon is so strong that even the people who, I mean, like, I guess maybe being in the position he's in with all the money and the fame and everything puts him at a disadvantage to leave. But if there was somebody to do it, you would think it would be him. Like, he's got all the resources to break away and do his own thing, and he couldn't do it. So it's not going to be
well. And you've got other
easy thing.
You've got other examples like Dave Chappelle leaving the country, going to South Africa because he was afraid for his life because of some of the stuff that he had said. There's an interview of Dave Chappelle. I don't know if it's even on YouTube anymore. It probably is, where he's talking about Martin Lawrence. And he's like, something is wrong in Hollywood, because you get Martin Lawrence, who's like, was this strong guy, came up from nothing. And all of a sudden he's out at 2 a.m. in the streets of Hollywood saying, they're trying to kill me. They're trying to kill me. And they take him under custody and take him out. And so Dave Chappelle's calling Hollywood out on this stuff. And within months or weeks, he has to flee to South Africa for his life. And what brings him back? A Netflix special that pays him like $30 million. And he comes back and he does a Netflix special, and he's like right back where he was. And then he keeps recording, keeps doing it. When Kanye went off the rails and started praising Jesus, who did they send? Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle was the one that went out and kind of talked him off the ledge and stuff. So yeah, there's a number of stuff on here. Dan, you brought up the Clive Davis stuff. I think I did see that video with Milli Vanilli. I actually owned a Milli Vanilli tape, and my brother, a cassette tape. And my brother was like, dude, why did you buy that? They're not actually singing. They're just lip syncing. And so he nailed it. But yeah, one of the, what was it? Rob and Fab. It's a video, I think, of Rob that's like, yeah, we made a deal with the devil and he sold us out.
That's right.
Have you heard anything
and it just
about?
Got me thinking.
Sorry, I was just wondering because if anyone knows about this, it's going to be Mitch. Have you heard anything about blonde hair being associated with like satanic abuse?
No.
So Landshark on X, he's kind of a big account on there.
Oh, you mean like dyeing your hair blonde?
Yeah,
not like born blonde.
Sorry, not born blonde.
Oh, yeah,
because he
like
he
it's a
posted
sign
thing
of abuse
of Kanye, who got checked into a mental hospital after his quote unquote breakdown, and he comes out of the hospital with his hair, like the next time he's seen, his hair is dyed blonde.
Blonde.
And Landshark at that point posted coming out with the dyed blonde hair is a sign that he was abused like in satanic rituals in the hospital. And now here he is, like,
Yeah.
whether it's real or not, making a porn company and like being insane. So I had never heard that connection before. I was just curious if you had.
Yeah, I think so. There are a number of things that I've read that are signals of something having happened. One is changing gender. One is changing your appearance in ways that are humiliating. So for someone like Kanye, who is proud of his heritage, of his race, to dye his hair blonde, it's a humiliation thing. And that's a theme you'll hear me talk about over and over again, unfortunately, is humiliation is key to the way the adversary works. He will lift you up and then sell you out. And I don't know what he gets from that, but that's something that happens. So the other thing, you've seen how many movies, I mean, even David Chappelle talks about this before he left the country. One of the things that got him in trouble is he pointed out how many black actors, men, are made to dress as women in movies. And it's usually comedy, and it's The Rock, the biggest, toughest guy, or Terry Crews dressing up as a girl as a humiliation ritual. Yeah, there's the Black Eye Club. There's also the foot cast, or the boot. Have you seen that? Having a boot on their right foot. Chris, you're muted.
Wow.
Sorry. I have a new mic set up, so I've been muting in between talking so I don't make any noise. But yeah, I have seen the boot one.
Yeah.
This is one I have not heard of. The Black Eye Club.
Yeah, it's a pretty weird one. All of these, I mean, you can see on this picture, it's like Charlie Rose, Obama, the Pope, Robert Downey Jr., Kanye, George Bush, like all like A name or A list names that everybody would know. Ryan Gosling, that one's sad. I hope that's not real. But yeah, all of these people who turn up with black eyes somehow.
Yeah. So bringing it back to, we've kind of waded through some darkness on this podcast so far, but bringing it back into light and hope. I think going back to that idea of when Babylon falls, what will you crave that you no longer have access to? And so if you can start eliminating some of those things from your life now and replacing them, it's impossible to eliminate something from your life, right? You can only replace things in your life. So if you could replace the music that you're listening to music that is uplifting or classical or something edifying, start there. As far as time goes, if you can spend your time gardening or working with animals or visiting people, visiting your neighbor, or, think of how prevalent loneliness is these days, and how edifying it can be and enlightening it can be to just go visit with a widow or a widower or an elderly couple that lives nearby you, how much you can learn, how much they will be edified by your conversation. So many great things in my life have come from interacting with people who are suffering from loneliness, because they're just so happy to see you and so happy to be around you. So if I could flip it to the positive, that's what I would say. Start replacing these things that, anything that comes out of Hollywood, replace that crap with something great. Anything that comes out of the music industry, replace it. Anything that comes out of the self-help industry, which you may consider uplifting, I would say replace it and go to God instead. In the midst of all of this darkness and sadness, some really cool things are happening. What's his name? Russell
Brand.
Who just got baptized. Russell Brand. Russell Brand just posted on TikTok that he's getting baptized. He doesn't say what church he's getting baptized into, but he has been, it's been fun to watch him, because I always thought he was just a snarky comedian. And so I would listen to his stuff every once in a while. And And then all of a sudden he started doing like more traditional values and pushing back against the progressivism. And then he's more recently gotten into almost orthodoxy and the virtues of orthodoxy. And, it was a month ago, he was like, should I join a church? Like, what church should I join? And people were chiming in on that. And now to the point where he's like, no, I want to make a commitment. I'm going to do something physical to illustrate, to show my commitment to following Jesus Christ. And pretty incredible that would happen. And we're seeing it happen more and more and more. We've talked a few times about Nala, the OnlyFans girl who converted to Christ. I actually saw a TikTok video of her responding to Pearl from it's Pearly Things, Just Pearly Things or something like that is her handle. She's all about traditional roles, but Pearl called her out and was like, this isn't authentic. This isn't true. She's faking it. And Nala does this video and she's like, I'm so sorry you feel that way. No, it is true. I am doing this sincerely. Kat Von Dutch is another famous person that was like involved in witchcraft and had witchcraft symbols tattooed all over her body. And she converted to Christ and got baptized, and she's blacking out all of those tattoos. She's like, well, I couldn't get them all removed. They wouldn't all come off. And so in order to hide up those symbols that are literally on my skin, she's just blacking them out. And anyway, we're seeing more and more of that. I think we're starting to see this division of people who see the virtues and joy and light that come from following Christ. And they're finally saying, I'm sick of the garbage. I'm ready to have light in my life. It's pretty cool.
It is. And Russell Brand is a good example of someone who I guess did break out of Babylon, if it's real. I mean, for a moment, he was like an A-list celebrity. He was in everything for a little bit there. And like he has broken free.
He used to be a real advocate for doing drugs. I don't know if you remember that, but
oh yeah.
Now I think he's sober and clean, and he's like, no, you got to stay away from that addiction.
Yeah, good.
So what do you guys think of Chris Pratt? Is he he's like an A-list celebrity, right? He's in everything, but he still proclaims to believe in God and has faith. And I'm just curious your thoughts, like on someone like him, do you think could have made a pact, but still be pushing Christ and all that? I don't know.
I think there's one thing that really differentiates you. You can see a lot of times at awards ceremonies, Oscars or Grammys or whatever, they will thank God, but it's like this unnamed God. And you don't know which God they're talking about. They're like, I thank God for giving me all this power, or giving me success. Most of all, I thank God. And I'm always, that rings weird to me when they thank God. But there are some who will thank Jesus. And that also sometimes rings weird because Jesus without the title is just a name. This is one of my pet peeves. And so you probably saw me tweet about this or post about it recently. Jesus without the title of Christ or Son of God or Redeemer or, all of the titles that he has, King of Kings, is just a name. So if they profess to follow Jesus Christ, I think that is impossible, or not impossible. It's improbable for a Luciferian to do. They will not, just like the evil spirits that are like, yeah, I know you're Jesus. But they won't promote Jesus Christ. If they invoke the name of Jesus Christ as humiliation, that's another thing. So you see, models porn stars who wear a cross. It's like, okay, that's a humiliation ritual, not actually professing the power of Jesus Christ. But if they're professing the power of Jesus Christ to save, I feel like that's going to be sincere more often than not. So Kanye doing a whole album about Jesus Christ's power to save seems like a real attempt. That's my take on it. So Chris Pratt saying, I think Jesus Christ, if he says it in those terms, or Jesus, the Redeemer or the Savior, I think that comes out of sincerity and not mockery.
I have a hard time. I'm just going to anybody who is that popular in the spotlight that much. I'm going to keep at arm's length because
Yeah, good call.
I don't know that you can get there without making the deals. I can't remember exactly what happened, but there was something with Chris Pratt where he came out and said something about, I think it was related to Christianity and stuff. And he got a bunch of backlash for it. And then like a week or two later, there was a party at his house where all of the A-list celebrities were there, like all the names you would know. And I can't remember what happened, but like something happened at the party. There was like a police incident, like something weird happened. And from that point on, he like kind of never said anything again. And it just makes you wonder if it's like they get him back in line. Like, hey,
yeah, was it an intervention?
Well, what are you doing? No more of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good practice. I mean, people deify all types of celebrities, and just a bad move. Because think about even just from a mathematical standpoint, how many times you've been disappointed to find out, oh, Kevin Spacey's been a weirdo his whole life, and I liked him as an actor, but now I can't stand it, and over and over and over again. It's like, dude, what? Don't even include that stuff in your life.
And then people try and play the mental gymnastics of like, well, he's I like him as an actor in his movies, even though he drives me nuts. He's a freak.
Yeah.
Even though he murdered 10 people, it's fine because he's a good actor.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that actually is another sign of a deal done if they get canceled at some point, because the accusations made against them are the same accusations that all of Hollywood gets made against. That Harvey Weinstein, he was accused of doing all of this stuff and prosecuted, and was basically flushed through Hollywood and was facing jail time or has been in jail. I can't remember. And so anything like that, it's like, okay, that's a sign that they did the deal and they're being flushed. But did you see his case just got thrown out in New York?
Yeah.
They're just like, never mind. We're letting you off the hook. It was a mistrial or something like that.
He's been in prison. I think he was sentenced to prison. Basically, I mean, he's pretty old now, so it was basically the rest of his life. I think he's been in prison a couple of years now, but appealing in the appeals court threw the whole thing out, so he's free.
Crazy. Wow. His deal came through, I guess.
Guess so.
And then the other thing is you've got like people who are straight up murdered. Whitney Houston, Michael Jackson, Prince. I mean, there's 3 right there that were the top of the top and then started to come out and say, things are bad here. This is messed up. And then they're straight up just murdered, and the murderers walk away. No problem. Like they're part of the club. No big deal. They made their sacrifice.
I have to add Chris Cornell and Chester Bennington. I still feel like that whole thing was so shady. Like something crazy went down there.
Yeah.
I mean, those 2 were incredible musicians, and I know they weren't like the most perfect people, but something's weird there.
Yeah. I think you got to pay the piper. You do the deal. You got to pay your part. All right, let's switch over to some of these others. I don't know how long we've been going here, but we've got a handful of other topics that we've got to crank through. Let's see. Let's talk graduation ceremonies. So we already talked about the protests on campus. There was a video I saw this morning of a gal who was going off because her high school graduation got canceled because of COVID. And 4 years later, to the day, her college graduation got canceled because of the Palestinian protests. Is that just luck, do you think? I mean, bad luck? Is there something about it? I don't know. Maybe if you play that, we can read the subtitles or we can listen to it.
You're going to have to let me know how audio is because I can't hear
All
it.
right, let's hear it.
Canceled our graduation.
It's good.
I have no words. Like, this is so, like, it's actually comical at this point. If you don't know, the seniors that are graduating college right now are the seniors that graduated in 2020, where we didn't have a high school graduation. And a lot of us had, like, drive-through fake graduations or no graduation at all. And now we are seniors about to graduate, getting ready for our first real graduation, and it just got canceled. I literally just, like, I just can't even, I'm in shock right now. We, as a whole senior class, have never had a real graduation because of COVID first, which we thought was like a one-time thing. Like, we're the class that got screwed over. It is what it is. Unlucky. Now, USC just canceled it. And of course, USC, we've all worked so hard to get here. USC, I'm sure you know, is not an easy school to get into. And so everyone that goes here is very accomplished.
That's probably good there.
Really hard to get in, and now they just canceled our.
One thing that I could say about this is good thing they had graduation ceremonies every year from the time they were in preschool all the way up to 11th grade or whatever. Yeah. This is the generation that got celebrated for mediocrity or even just showing up. Right. So, but when I saw this, it made me, man, it really feels like if you were serious as a world leader, an economic leader, that as these things are happening, you would try to stop them. You would change the way that you're going. But instead, they just lean into it over and over again. They feed the fear. They feed the frustration. It's the war in Ukraine, sending more money there, driving inflation with government overspending. It's like you would think that at some point they would be like, oh, we're the least popular legislature that there ever was. And the president is the least popular president that there ever was. Maybe we should do something different. And then they just keep doing the same thing. Yeah. And so I'm like, it has to be planned. Like it has to be on purpose. They have to be orchestrating all of this for a reason, because there's no way they're that inept or no way they're that dumb. And maybe it's, then I go back to, we wanted to talk about Tucker Carlson and his interview with Joe Rogan. Remember, he said in there something to the effect that the weakest leaders are the ones that get infested with these interdimensional evil spirits, essentially, is how he kind of laid it out. And so it's like, either these guys are really dumb, or they're doing it on purpose, or they're possessed by darkness, and those entities are driving these behaviors. And I have to think it's the latter of the three, that the leaders are being driven by dark entities that are causing repeated actions to get a certain result, to drive fear, to drive chaos, to drive lack of faith, a lack of belief. It's all orchestrated. Like there's no way they got their graduation canceled 4 years ago and they get it canceled this year. Like that doesn't just happen. It has to be designed. Yeah. And so then I'm like, for what purpose? And I don't know if you saw, there was a viral video, some Gen X blonde lady on TikTok posted this video where basically she's calling on Gen X to start a civil war and to take out everybody in Washington. Did you guys see this?
No.
I
also have the Civil War movie that just came out.
Yeah, dude. I have a hard time. I'm going to see if I can find it on my phone while we're talking here, but I'm like, dude, they are orchestrating all of this for something. And that's a recurring theme that keeps coming up over and over again. Just go to war, go to war, go to war. Here it is. I'll text you the link here, or let me send you the link, Chris. I'll text it to you since I'm on my phone.
And this kind of thing has happened in the past where, like in World War II, there's pretty good evidence that British intelligence got Hitler into power and then they go to war with him. You have decent evidence that British intelligence kind of stirred up the United States Civil War and got that going. And so
Yeah.
these kinds
Oh,
of
what
things
was the
happen
one?
all the time.
The other one was the Kennedy, not the Kennedy assassination, but the Bay of Pigs.
Yeah.
That intelligence
Gulf of
agencies.
Tolkien or whatever.
Yeah. Pretty crazy. I don't know if you can move it
Weapons
from.
of mass destruction in
Yeah.
Iraq. Like they've done this stuff all the time.
Well, that was, I remember after 9/11, like everybody was patriotic. Everybody was awesome. We all banded together and we were all like one. And then, we were all mad. We're all mad at perpetrators, the guys that did this or anybody associated with them. They told us Saddam Hussein was involved and was causing problems with innocent people in Iraq. And we were like, yeah, let's go cut his head off, and in hindsight, I'm like, oh, I totally got worked on that. They totally did that to me. And I think a lot of people have done that with COVID as well, where they're like, wait a minute, they got me cheering for masks when masks didn't even work. So here's this Gen Xer calling for war. She cusses a lot on this. So if you're against cussing, if that's going to hurt your ears, mute us for 55 seconds till this goes off the screen. Sorry about the language on that one, but that video took off there. It didn't get a ton of hits there, but then it got shared on X where it went viral, and went viral being shared on Reels as well. And the comical thing to me is I'm Gen X. I'm like the younger end of Gen X. And I'm like, dude, I am way too old to go to war. Like, are you kidding me? My back hurts, my feet hurt, like all that kind of stuff. No, I'm just joking. But yeah, I'm watching that going, why are we fomenting this? Like maybe it's necessary, but it really seems like they're working us over, that they're trying to get us to a point where we'll say, let's shut this down. And maybe it's a militarized justice department that's trying to get people to raise their hands so they can throw them in prison. Any dissenters get thrown in prison, but man, it really does seem like this is orchestrated.
I think, first of all, we don't know who they are. Like she's saying, I mean, the people that she's probably thinking of that she wants to go after are not the people who are going to actually matter.
Yeah.
Second, I forgot what I was going to say. Dang it. I had a really cool, it was going to be so good. I know it was going to be good.
That's right. Well, we do know that the word is more powerful than the sword. And I think if we can convince people that there are alternative ways rather than crowding into campuses and chanting, or crowding into downtown city centers and taking them over and being like, no, anarchy, blah, blah, blah. If it's like, let's do the opposite of that. Let's move to the countryside and build families and grow food and read the word of God and become, more powerful. I just listened to a talk by Brigham Young, and it was amazing. We can probably, I'll share it on X, but the talk was Brigham Young saying, hey, we need to, because we're out here in the middle of nowhere, we need to build factories and start making clothing and start making our own equipment, like our farming equipment. And we need to have our own schools. And the schools that they built, he even says, he's like, our children are more literate than any other state percentage wise. And that was, back in the probably 1860s, 1870s. And so I was listening to his talk and I'm like, I think this resonates with me. Like, yeah, let the city burn itself to the ground at this point. I'm ready to build up my family and arm them with knowledge and understanding and the security of being able to grow their own food and take care of themselves. And Brigham Young actually talks about that in the talk. He's like, there's plenty of bounty from the earth directly. Like, we don't need to import anything. We don't need to go without, because we can build it, create it, grow it right here. And that was pretty inspiring.
A couple of things. The first is, I remembered what I was going to say, is that I think a lot of what they're doing Tucker Carlson talks about this, that things are like bad here in America and people could feel it, which we've talked about before, but they don't know what to do about it. There's nothing they really can do, it seems. And so that's, in his opinion, was that's why they latch on to these foreign wars, because they can feel like they're making a difference still in these other countries.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I can at least make a difference in Ukraine, even though my own country's falling apart. And so I think part of it is they want people to feel that way. Like people are frustrated and things are not going how they want them to go. Kind of goes back to that union worker who they're like, what's your message for Joe Biden? And he's like, F you.
Yeah.
People are mad, but their Congress just sent another $95 billion to foreign countries. Like they have no way to stop that. And so it's just this growing frustration and tension that people are feeling, where they don't know what else to do. And you get ladies like this who are like, well, there's one thing we can do. We can like start being crazy and try and overthrow the government, which is not going to get you anywhere. I think, to your point, the thing that would hurt the system the most is if you just stop participating in it. If enough people are like, we're not buying your stuff anymore, we're not watching your shows, we're not doing any of that, you have to hit a critical mass of it. But at some point, you've cut them off from their money and from being able to do their influences and psyops on you. They can't, if you're not watching their shows, they can't tell you what to think anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, think of all the people that complain about food, the food that they get in the grocery store. Oh, my apples have this wax on them that is pervasive, or, oh, these tomatoes were green until they were sprayed with gas and now they're red. It's like, okay, well, are you growing a garden? Because you can grow both of those things basically for free. Or if you suck at growing stuff, are you going and helping a neighbor who is good at growing stuff and you show up and pull their weeds for them? Right? It's one thing to sit there and be subject to the fear. It's another thing to actually come out and vocally fight against the fear, but it's an entirely different thing to take action against the fear. So if you've got problems with your food, figure out a way to grow your own food, or figure out a way to buy food from a place that you know grows it the way that you want it grown. I don't think that's too difficult for anyone in this country. I mean, surely there are places where growing your own food isn't an option, but certainly there are places where you can get food that you know is grown the right way.
I think I kind of got into the whole conspiracy, if that's what you want to call it, or government corruption, that whole thing. My entry into that was through the nutrition world and working in that world, because I think they go after those people, and like people like the Weston A. Price Foundation or any of these people who are teaching exactly this. On like, you don't have to be reliant on the pharmaceutical companies or the food industry. You can just do this on your own. They really go after them because of that, because it is like, I went to the emergency room, I got a cut on my finger, so I had to go get some stitches. And this is the second time it's happened, because I had my appendix out last year, and both times they're like, what medications are you on? And I'm like, I'm not on any medications. And they're shocked. They're like, I haven't heard someone say that in a long time. And I'm like, I'm not part of your little system you got going on. And they don't I mean, obviously the doctor, the hospital doesn't care, but the industry, the pharmaceutical industry and the government and all of these huge, gigantic, faceless things, they don't like it. They want you part of the system and contributing to their bank accounts and being more or less controlled by them. And you can break away from that by just choosing not to. Just saying, yeah, I'm not buying your stuff anymore.
Yeah, and that goes in degrees, right? It can be something as simple as food. We're going to have a guest here on the podcast that is familiar with gold backs. Have you heard about gold backs? They're like gold dollars with actual gold in them. Yeah. And companies are signing up and saying, yeah, I'll accept your gold backs in exchange for my products. And for my beef company, I'm actually considering that. letting people pay in gold backs. Number one, it opens up a market to you. But number two, you actually get gold in exchange for the products that you're selling. So it's a anti-system type solution. Bringing it back to our conversation about music, choosing not to participate is an option. So you can choose to say, we're going to listen to less of this and more of this other thing. And that's something super simple that can be done. And like you mentioned, Chris, in your 30-day test, you'll be amazed at what that opens up for you. You start to feel differently, see differently, think differently. It's pretty amazing.
There's nothing that frustrates me more than hearing people say, wow, Disney's like so evil and trying to push so many evil things on my kids. And then they have a Disney Plus subscription. I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like,
did you see that 25% of the hours watched on Disney Plus is Bluey?
That's good. I'm glad.
Well, like they spent $8 billion on the Star Wars stuff, another $8 billion on Marvel, and those are like 3-hour movies. And Bluey episodes are like 7 seconds, or not 7 seconds, 7 minutes. So you take all of those Bluey episodes stacked up, they're beating not just a 3-hour Marvel movie, but they're 25% of Disney Plus streams. Now,
crazy.
Yeah, that is crazy. Bluey is great, but there's even stuff in Bluey that you have to watch out for. I haven't watched a ton of it, but my granddaughter has started watching some Bluey, and so we'll watch Bluey together. And there are things that she doesn't understand that I see, and I'm like, okay, maybe we should talk about that or whatever. Less overt, obviously, but certainly stuff that can be absorbed by kids at a very young age and taught to think certain ways. But yeah, that's pretty surprising.
Yeah. If you think Disney's evil, just stop giving them your money. And you're probably feeling like, well, what's my $10 a month going to do? That's not going to do anything. And you're right. But if enough of you do it, it's going to do something. It's going to be a problem. Then they'll use your tax money from Congress to bail them out. But
yeah, that's true.
Maybe you can't do anything about that.
Yeah. But that's one thing. It's like your Hulu subscription, your Disney Plus subscription, your Netflix subscription, that's all feeding that beast. And what is that? $50 a month, maybe $60 a month, something like that. And then, whatever other subscriptions you've got, it's like, man, if you repurpose that into a garden, or repurpose that into some chickens, or repurpose that into a Dwelt membership, or, some sort of active thing that you could do outside as a family, that could be transformative. And it's super easy to sit down and watch a show while you're swimming in Babylon. But the more time you spend outside of Babylon, the less palatable it becomes. And I'm certainly not perfect, but I've been on road trips recently where I'm like, okay, maybe I'll just sit back here and watch while somebody else is driving. So I'll pull up Netflix. Dude, trying to find something on Netflix or any one of those other platforms, I'm like, I couldn't care less about any of this stuff. I'm not interested. Yeah. It becomes less and less palatable. And I think when the time comes that Babylon does fall, if those things are already outside of your appetites, you're not going to miss them. But it's going to be hard for people who live and breathe that stuff to be without it.
Yeah, for sure.
One thing on that note is you've probably heard of VidAngel, and I tried VidAngel for a while so I could watch some shows that were on Netflix without the swearing, right? Or the nudity or whatever.
Violence or
Yeah. And it was so interesting because what I noticed is even with the swear words gone, even with some of it edited, I just had a sick feeling, right? I'll admit, I watched Breaking Bad because everybody raved about Breaking Bad, and it has like a 9 something out of 10 rating on IMDb. And so I'm like, maybe I can do it with VidAngel. So I watched it with VidAngel, and I just, every single time I'd put on an episode, even when it was edited, I was like, this is horrible. Like, this is the most vile, horrible show I've ever watched in my entire life, even with it edited. And so it just showed me, like, you still have to throw it away. Like, there's still these shows, like, you can't just think you can edit some of it out and everything's going to be fine, because the whole premise of the show is just awful and disgusting. Right. And so, you know, imagine, I thought, like, I have people that have raved about Game of Thrones, and I'm like, dude, if you watched that through VidAngel and watched an edited version, you wouldn't even be able to watch it, because none of it would make sense, because
it's like
so
3
horrible.
minutes long.
Right. Yeah. So you really do have to, like, make those decisions, like, to just stay away completely, you know? And there's nothing but TV MA ratings all across Netflix and Hulu, and right. Like, that's all you get now, practically.
Yeah.
And editing that out is not going to cut it. It's not going to work.
There was
just what I found.
There was a general conference talked by Elder Gary E. Stevenson last fall, where he gives this analogy, or he tells this story, that he was somewhere in the world and they had a large meeting for church members, and they had so many members that wanted to attend that they had to do it in a sporting arena. And he's like, you know, hours before this event, this church meeting, the arena was being used for sport. And he's like, think of all of the noise and all of the contention and all of the rude stuff that was happening. And he doesn't mention drinking, but to take the analogy further, it's like drinking and violence and lust and contention and noise and, you know, just this overpowering feeling that crowds out any internal thought or whisperings of the Spirit. And he's like, all of that was happening here in this place hours ago. And yet now in this meeting where everything is reverent, we can feel the love of God. We can feel the light of the Holy Ghost coming into our lives and filling up our minds and our thoughts. And I think he was giving a great analogy of what we should look for in our life. You know, those intense experiences that are just immersed in Babylon versus the light-filled, quiet moments that bring us closer to God. Not that we always have to be reverent or that we always have to be monk-like, but it's just a matter of choosing which is which. Elder David A. Bednar gave a talk. I think it was entitled "Be Still" in April conference, where he talks about that. Like, find time, make time to be still. But I think that's really important. That's one of the things that I've gotten from homesteading is I go out in the morning to run sprinklers. And so I walk through the fields, the sun's rising. I got my dogs with me. Like, I go out there and turn on the sprinklers and see the green grass growing. Or last night we milked the goats, and then we had to put the goats away, and goats are, I don't know, they push back on everything that you try to do. So I'm trying to lead these goats back into their pen, and they're pushing and pulling and being knotheads. And so I started to get frustrated, and I finally got the goat in her pen again. And I look up, and the sun is setting and the birds are chirping and everything's green and beautiful. And we have these little creeks running through our property, just babbling little brooks. And I instantly went from mad and frustrated to a place of peace and calm and inspiration. So I think that's going to be more and more valuable in coming days. I did want to talk, we're probably close to wrapping up here, but I did want to talk about Russia and Poland.
We're only halfway through. I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, you're only halfway through? Okay, good. But, you know, I think about the times that we're in and the times that are coming. Now is the time to have those calm moments, to get the inspiration that we're going to need to survive what's nearly upon us.
Yeah.
All right. So, Chris, you want to pull up? No, go ahead.
I'm sitting here looking at the screen, and it looks like we've been live streaming this whole time. So I was trying to double check that the case. I don't think it is. I think it's just showing me something weird.
Oh, that's funny because I've been looking for the countdown timer. I'm like, normally there's a countdown timer right now, but I haven't seen it this whole episode. So maybe we are live streaming.
Yeah, it was. Well, it has the three of us, and then it says one in audience with like a live streaming symbol, but
Well,
we're
let's
not.
check it
So
out. I'll hop on X and see if we are live streaming.
Yeah, but anyways, Russia and Poland. I haven't heard any of the thing about this.
Okay, so I think I shared a link if you want to pull it up. I wish X had a back button. I can never get back to where I just was. Let me pull up my bookmarks. Okay, this is the Chuck Colesto. Is it in there? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Russia threats
right now. I will say I'm always very cautious of anything from this guy.
Yeah, he seems to jump the gun, that's for sure. And I haven't seen. Well, I wanted to talk through it a little bit, so we'll read it and talk through it. Breaking now, Russia threatens strikes on Poland, identifies NATO nuclear sites as primary targets, developing. Belarus leader cautions of apocalypse. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei somebody stated today that NATO nuclear weapons deployed in Poland would become a primary target for Russia, making a further heightening of tensions between Moscow and Europe. The statement followed remarks by Polish President, that guy, on Monday, who indicated that Poland would house Western nuclear weapons in response to Russia's move to position intercontinental ballistic missiles in neighboring Belarus late last year. Whether this is current or not, whether that Russian deputy foreign minister actually said that, I think we can all agree that this is a no-brainer, right? As Western European countries say, hey, we're putting nuclear warheads in Poland, Russia's going to amp up their nuclear threat and say, yeah, we're going to respond. For years and years and years, the preppers have thought about thermonuclear war as being a thing that was impending. I mean, I was, as a Gen Xer, I remember doing nuclear war drills in school. You guys never had this, but they would shout out like atomic bomb or something like that. We all had to get under our desks and cover our heads. And it was something that was always present. It's interesting to me that the prepper community has transitioned from nuclear war to electromagnetic pulses. Have you guys noticed that? It used to be threat of nuclear war. And now it's like, well, what if the grid goes down? And I'm wondering if you guys have any thoughts about that, if there really is a transition, or if it's just like something that I'm picking up on that's not really real.
No, I've noticed that. I think the nuclear war thing has come up more recently because of the Russia stuff, but now Iran. But aside from those specific conflicts, it's been much more about the grid and that stuff.
Yeah.
That's because nukes aren't real.
Chris and I have this ongoing conversation that I'm not smart enough to understand nuclear warfare. And so my brain is like, is this real? Owen Benjamin, sorry to bring him up twice on the same podcast, but he talks about how the atomic bombs in Japan were actually that the territory that they were purportedly exploded in doesn't have lasting radiation, never had lasting radiations. And so what really happened was that they dropped accelerant over those areas and then firebombed them. And so because of that, that's how you got the big explosion and people's shadows being burned into concrete walls behind them, because it was such a firebomb, I guess, that destroyed the place. So I still can't fathom how you enrich uranium by taking millions of tons of rock and putting it all into one uranium ball and then exciting that uranium so that it does an explosion that cascades out. There's also some math being done on the atomic bombs that were dropped in Japan, and people are saying, wait, if you took the same amount of TNT and dropped it on a place with accelerant, you would get the same result. So that's probably a conversation for another time.
Well, Tucker kind of talked about it on Joe Rogan too, that nobody knows the exact moment where, like, the aha moment for the atomic bomb, like where it came from. Nobody knows how it happened, really. I mean, we know there was the whole Oppenheimer thing, obviously, in the Manhattan Project, but no one has a record of the moment that was like, this is it. This is how we do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting. I've heard the firebombing theory. I have a friend who says his argument, he doesn't think they're fake. He thinks that it's like extremely controlled and there aren't actually that many of them. Because his thing is, that was in the 40s where we dropped those. And since then, there's thousands of them. We know that there's like hundreds at least missing from the Soviet Union that no one knows where they went. And with all the evil people in the world and terrorists and like dictators and stuff, how has one not been used since, basically? And his conclusion is they're very controlled, and that's how. My conclusion is it's because they're not real. They're not out there.
Yeah.
So what happened
go ahead, Dan.
with Hiroshima then? Like, what's your thought on that, or what are people saying about that?
Well, that's what Mitch.
This is a first for me. I've never heard anything.
No, this is
like
what
this,
Mitch was just
explaining.
explaining.
Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That's the theory, is that they were firebombed and not nuclear explosions.
Okay, so what's the firebomb concept?
So basically, imagine dropping a bunch of gasoline on an area and then launching a TNT bomb. That TNT, obviously creates this shock wave that would be enough to ignite some sort of accelerant. And so then everything does get blasted by the shock wave, and the accelerant igniting also creates its own shock wave that obliterates everything and leaves a bunch of the things that people witnessed after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, like people's shadows being burned into concrete. Well, the concrete around their shadow being burned and nothing being left of the person because they got incinerated instantly. People with burn injuries. There were tens of thousands of people with burn injuries, survivors that got burned because of it. And which is more typical of their injuries were more typical of an actual burn with like gasoline than they were of like nuclear atomic radiation ripping apart your skin and stuff like that.
And so is there evidence showing that like there is no lingering radiation as well? And so maybe that's why there's doubt.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So Chris, I do not mean to keep going down this rabbit hole, but I just have to say two more things. Owen Benjamin points out there's still plenty of weapons to be afraid of. So don't
that's true.
They've got bad stuff. The second thing is, in a counter argument to this, it does seem like the governments of the world are afraid of whatever they're calling a nuclear bomb. Like, it's definitely I can't say that word because I can't say
deterring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely stopping them from, or at least it appears to be stopping them from escalating certain wars and stuff because they don't want this threat to happen. So I don't know.
Yeah. And a nuclear program is a great way to launder money, right? You put it in the congressional budget and you push it through, and nobody gets to see where that money's spent because it's all secret. And you have legislators who come in, making, what do they make? A couple $100,000 a year and leave. Well, they never leave, but 10 years later, you measure their net worth and they're worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And it's a pattern that is repeated over and over and over again. And anyway,
another great way to launder money is to fake a moon landing.
Which is topical because that guy was on Joe Rogan like yesterday, right? Talking about it. Okay. So let's bring this back to preparedness and survival in terms of nuclear warfare. What's your only option? I mean, if the sirens go off or you get the text message like they did in Hawaii. I don't know if you guys remember that. It was like 2020 or 2019. A text
Yeah, I
message went
remember
out that said, yeah, nuclear warhead is coming our way. Prepare to die, basically. And then they're like,
Yeah,
oh,
I
whoops, that
remember
was a
that.
mistake. And it was like T minus 20 minutes or something like that
Yeah.
before 22 minutes. And so they all just sat there and waited. They're like, crap, I guess I better call my mom. And so, yeah, I think, from a preparedness standpoint, if you've got that type of warning, what do you do? Like, one thing that where I live, I'm good. I mean, I'm not good, but nobody's pointing a warhead at central Utah in the valley that I live in because there's nothing there. But, let's say you live in, I don't know, Ogden, Utah, or Weber, Utah, right by Hill Air Force Base. You're like, oh crap, I'm toast.
I hate
Or
to say it, but if you've got 20 minutes and that's your warning, then yeah, you probably are toast. It's too
yeah,
late.
yeah. Now, if you live in Spanish Fork, Utah, you're probably okay. Or anywhere like Provo or South, you're like, okay, I'm going to hop in my car and I'm going to go. Problem is, everybody else is going to have that same idea. So, yeah, I mean, where I am, I'm going to be like, oh man, I'm going to hit my knees in prayer and hope that my kids can get here. Maybe I'll actually be going towards Utah Valley to try to get to where my kids and grandkids are to bring them back. But for most people, you're basically, you're in a bad situation. There's nothing you can do. Contrast that with an EMP where it's like, okay, nobody dies immediately. Well, very few people die immediately. People who are on life support, they're going to die. But everybody else doesn't die immediately. Then you've actually got some time to get where you need to get. The other big one that we used to see a lot was talk about terrorist threats. A dirty bomb in a crowded location. It was actually, here we go again. Owen Benjamin just tweeted, I think yesterday or today, something about like, there's weird magic going on right now. There's weird witchcraft going on right now. Don't go to any major gatherings. Stay out of the cities. I don't know if you guys saw that, but I thought that was definitely non-typical of him, because he's usually not posting fear-related stuff. Lots of racist stuff for sure, but not much fear stuff. And so that was really interesting. But with
the terrorist thing has kind of come back up again, I feel like recently.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Becoming more of a threat, probably because of the borders, just letting millions of people in, which I guess Mitch is cool with, but
I never said that.
I'm just
I don't think I heard him say that.
I'm like, well, if they're here, we might as well make the best of it. But they should probably solve that problem. Anyway, yeah, the terrorist threat with Iran, with Hamas, with Hezbollah, like that stuff keeps coming up, right? And then all of these people coming across the borders, that does keep coming up. I remember with the eclipse, a month ago, people were saying, don't go into big cities, stay away from large crowds, stuff like that.
This might be a good spot for a question we got from someone who listens.
All right, let's hear it.
So they live in basically Cache Valley, Utah, which for those who don't know, how far north of Salt Lake is
it's like an hour north of Salt Lake.
Yeah. You have Logan up there where Utah State University is. So Logan, at least at certain times of the year, is kind of busy.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of Logan, I mean, I haven't been up there in a while, but it's pretty much farmland.
Yeah,
at least last
really
time
rural.
I was there. So
yep.
His question was, he's certainly not in a city, Salt Lake City type area, but he's definitely not remote either. It's kind of an in-between. It's like an in-between the suburbs and rural kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And only, 20 minutes away from maybe a big population center like Ogden or something. So his question is, in a situation like that, is he kidding himself by thinking he can have some security for his family, like in a disaster scenario, or are there things he can actually do to help him?
Yeah. So Cache Valley is I'm not totally familiar with the area. I spent 1 quarter up at Utah State back in the 90s, so things have changed since then. But it's a great location because it's isolated. It's within, there's a mountain range between it and Brigham City, even, or Ogden. I think it's probably a good 50 miles from any major population center in and of itself. Like, I think it's a great place to be. I would recommend being 2 miles outside of suburbia within Cache Valley. So if you're right downtown Logan, that can be problematic. If you're over by the campus, that could be problematic. If you're, 2 miles outside of those areas, you're probably in a much better situation. So I think it's a great community to be in. I don't know if they have a hidden nuclear silo up there that's on somebody's target or something like that. But it seems like a great location. I would recommend having a second location if you're in the suburbs. So there are lots of landowners out there that own ranches, that own cabins. There's a ski resort up there. There are places where you can get a little bit more distance. And you don't necessarily have to buy one of those places. You could find somebody that's either a family member or a friend or a member of your congregation, your ward, if you're LDS, that has some land. And one of the best things that you can do to get started is to ask them if you can help. This is actually my family's story. Is my great grandfather homesteaded some land, and it was bought and sold through the generations. And my dad, we always had access to it. Like, we could go up there and camp or on the family deer hunt or something like that. But we never owned any of it. Well, my dad volunteered. He has 5 boys. He volunteered us to go help fix fence. And so we're like, we get Saturdays ruined 3 times a year because we're like, what are we doing going and fixing fence? And he was like, oh, this is part of our heritage. We want to give back. So we'd go up and we'd fix fences for a distant relative that I never knew and spend a whole Saturday doing it. You'd get cut up and it'd be a pain and stuff like that. But we did it. It's fun to be outdoors and fun to be up at the ranch, and we'd have a big lunch and all that kind of stuff. Is a good experience overall. And after a few years of doing this, one of the landowners reached out to my dad and said, hey, I'd like to sell my piece. Would you be interested in buying it? Excuse me. And my dad was able to buy that piece of the ranch. And that was probably the first, excuse me, one sec. I'm getting over a cold still. But that was the first property that we were able to get access to and that my dad was able to buy. And it stays within our family, and it's got a really special purpose for our family. And I believe that it will be a help to many people in the future as people are trying to get out of populated areas. So I would suggest reaching out to some landowner there, creating a relationship by offering to help. And if you're there helping them, that will open up the opportunity for permission. And then you can start, building a secondary location with that landowner. If that landowner is not receptive to it, find another one. There are plenty of them there. That's kind of the steps that I would recommend taking. Or find a landowner that we can build a dwelt location up there, and we'll do it. We have another landowner that hit us up. I've got to follow up with him. That's outside of, I think, Atlanta. And I met with another one yesterday, another location in central Utah, where he's like, man, I'd love to have a dwelt location. So I think there are a lot of landowners that are just sitting on land that's not really doing anything, that they would be willing to, work with you to create a place, or work with us to create a place for other people. But you're far better off in Cache Valley than you are in Salt Lake Valley or Utah Valley or any other dense population area.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you're kidding yourself thinking that you can at least have a better chance of keeping your family safe.
Yeah.
Read Prairie Fire by Clay Martin. It's like right. Really, it is the perfect book for that specific scenario. So,
yeah, we since we're talking about reader questions, we did get one. Let me see if I've got the link. I don't have the link. Let me pull it up on X. was one that I recently interacted with. Cause I want to give him credit. Okay. Ribera, at RIBERA84 said, interesting food storage idea. Pemmican lasts pretty much forever. Great for barter. Are you guys old enough to remember the Pemmican commercials of the 90s?
No, I've never heard of pemmican.
I've heard of pemmican, but yeah, I don't know the commercial.
There was a beef jerky brand that said, that came out with a product called pemmican. The idea of pemmican is you take beef and you mix in some berries and some other stuff, and you let it dry, and then you've got nutrition that's not just beef, but it's also got some other nutrition profiles in it. And supposedly once beef is dried, it lasts like forever, right? Or a pretty long time. And so if you have pemmican that has all of this other stuff in it, tallow, dried meat, dried berries, then you can meet your caloric needs better. And it's a broader nutrition profile because it's got some fat in it and it's got some carbs in it. There was a cartoon that was passing around the internet a while ago, and it was one of those quizzes, and it was a picture of a deserted island, and it had a canoe full of fruits and vegetables and a canoe full of meat. And the question was, which of these would you choose if you were in a survival situation? And it's not a straightforward answer, right? Because you're in an island, so you know that the meat is going to spoil pretty dang quickly. And so you're inclined to say, oh, I would do the vegetables and the fruit because you can store that for longer. But how much longer can you store fruits and vegetables?
Not much.
Not much, right? An apple doesn't stay fresh for very long, of course, unless it's sprayed with chemicals. But normally an apple lasts a few weeks before it goes bad. And if you don't have refrigeration, it's even less than that, right? And so if you chose the vegetables and fruits without thinking about it, you have a little bit of time left. If you chose the meats and you say, oh, I'm going to smoke the meats because smoked meat can last forever. Then it's like, okay, now I have months and months of food on hand that I can survive with. And so the other idea with the fruits and vegetables is, oh, I'll get the seeds and I'll plant those, and then I can grow food indefinitely. And it's like, yeah, but what are you going to live off of for a year while your garden grows, or even 3 months while your garden grows?
Yeah.
And so I appreciate the recommendation on pemmican. I've never made pemmican, but my wife and I just had a conversation about using our own beef to make jerky. And so we've tried it in the past a few times. It's worked great. I mean, it's hard to mess up jerky. Take some meat, put some salt and brown sugar on it and dry it out, and you're good to go. But we're actually thinking that might be one of the products that we start selling from our farm is jerky.
Awesome. I mean, this pemmican stuff looks, I'm like, there's a new health hack just dropped. This is going to be the new thing.
Pemmican?
I'm going to meme it into being the new thing.
There you go.
Pretty nutrient dense, high calorie. I don't know. Seems pretty
delicious.
Cool.
Yeah. I recently started an elimination diet of my own. So I'm only eating meat, eggs, cheese, and milk from our own goats, meat from our own cows, eggs from our own chickens. And unfortunately, we don't make cheese yet, but my wife just got some rennet, so we're going to start making our own cheese. So in the meanwhile, I'm eating grocery store cheese, which is dumb. But it's amazing, where do you get meat when you're out and about? You can go to a restaurant and buy. In fact, yesterday I went to R&R Barbecue, and it was $18 a pound. No, it was $30 a pound for brisket. And so I got half a pound of brisket, and it's like comes out in this little thing. It's like this much meat. Right. Yeah. And you can go to the grocery store and get some jerky, but most jerky has a bunch of sugar in it. And so there is one brand I found at Walmart that's a no sugar brand. And of course it's more expensive than all the other stuff. But
Tillamook makes a no sugar jerky.
Okay. Well. Yeah, this might've even been Walmart brand. So I don't know.
For those looking for a hack, Costco usually sells it. and so you can get a pretty big bag of it for a decent price.
Nice. Okay. Or in a few months, you'll be able to get it from Wait Utah Beef.
Yeah, there you go.
Sweet.
And if
But-
only there was some sort of guide that was going to tell people how to smoke meat and dry meat.
Yeah. We've got the first Dwelt guide up and ready to go. We're just working to get that online. And that's the next project that we have on our own homestead, is building a smoker that we can just hang up a side of beef or a side of pork and keep it in there and just let it smoke day in and day out, month in and month out. Go out there and cut a slab of meat off of it, take it in the house and chew it up. So that's the next skill that we're going to be trying to perfect on the farm.
Can we also talk about how we're going to help me to be able to move and be your neighbor so I can take part in all the joyous things that you talk about all the time?
There you go. Well, phase one is your very own Dwelt membership, right? So you'll start transitioning out of weekend activities, soccer with the kids and stuff like that, and transition that to, hey, we're going down to our Dwelt location and spending the weekend in our second home. And then once you've done that for a while, you'll be like, wow, we are so sick of driving into the city. Let's just find a place and move full time. I've actually seen that with so many of my neighbors where they did something like that, where they started spending more time in the countryside, and eventually they're like, okay, we just have to make the leap. And it's amazing what you can do when you sell your house in, I don't know, Lehigh, Utah, and you have some equity. You can buy some land and get started for sure. But you just got to plan on spending 2 or 3 times the amount of equity in order to get infrastructure in place. So yet another reason for Dwelt. We'll do it for you.
Love it.
Well, I think it's probably about time to wrap it up here. We've gone through just some of the stuff, man. We missed a bunch of the stuff. If you've asked us a question or made a comment online and we haven't addressed it, feel free to hit us up. I think DMs are open for many of us. I did want to get into a 65-year sign and an 8-year sign. I have a whole bunch of stuff on that we'll get to on the next episode, where 65 years and 8 years, as we've talked about in the past, Isaiah gives signs to Hezekiah. Well, the Lord gives signs to Isaiah to give to Hezekiah. And those signs have been seen here in 1827. We saw it happen. In 2017, we saw it happen. But there's also some stuff from the Book of Mormon that I'm going to share next time. 2 different places in the Book of Mormon where a 65-year sign and an 8-year sign led to the collapse of a nation, the violent removal of leaders of countries. I'm trying to make my infractions or I don't know, trying to make my FBI agent happy that's monitoring everything that I do. Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, some cool stuff in the Book of Mormon that directly ties to our day. So we'll touch on some of that in the next episode, get into some scripture. I think you'll really enjoy what I put together for you on that.
Awesome. Can't wait.
All right. Start buying jerky, everyone.
Bye.
Sounds
All
good.
right, we'll see ya.
See ya.